Welcome to Anime Out of Context, a comedy review show hosted by a basement dweller who grew up scrounging terrible fan subs on sketchy websites prior to the convenience of modern streaming, alongside a willfully ignorant soul whose only knowledge of anime comes from the shows forced upon him here. This show will contain spoilers, incorrect information, and copious amounts of adult language. Our hosts are not experts on any topic, and everything they say should be taken with a grain of salt. Thank you for listening, and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Anime Out of Context, the show where I attempt to explain the sometimes weird, sometimes wonderful, but always hilarious world of anime. And as you might have noticed, I am alone for the first time in a long time. In case you didn't realize, I am Shaun Rollins, and my co-host Remington is in fact not here today. Now you might be wondering why that is. Did I kill him in a fit of rage after what he did to me over the month of December and the 6 months leading up to it? No, I didn't. Or perhaps Dylan killed him for all the extra work. No, he's still very much alive and he's hale and healthy. But the thing is, guys, we are a little on the exhausted side this week. And because of that, we figured that it would be nice to give ourselves a little bit of a break from a normal podcast episode. However, we didn't want to leave you guys with absolutely nothing. So instead, I'm going to use this as a lovely opportunity, without my angry, cynical friend to counteract any of my statements, to give a bit of a lovely recap of what we've been through this year. And while I am not the Queen of England, and my address probably won't be viewed by anywhere near as many people, I still think that it might be worth looking back. And I figured that since Remington a year ago gave some recommendations, I would as well. However, since Remington's recommendation list is a lot more broad and introspective as his 4 years of working on a weeby podcast while not being a weeb, my list will actually be just consistent of recommendations from all the anime I've watched in the past year. Is it going to be a deep dive, introspective list on all these lovely anime that you should go and watch for yourself? Probably not. It's probably just going to be a light recommendation list of things that I enjoyed watching, and I feel like everybody should have the opportunity to go out and watch and give their opinions on. And who knows? Maybe we'll do episodes of the podcast on them as well in the near future. But that alone would not make a very interesting episode. After all, I am a fairly weeby person. I admit it. And just hearing my recommendations alone is probably not going to do it for everybody. So I figured I would also mention a little behind the scenes stuff and give you guys a list of my favorite episodes that we made this year as well. Now, these might be my favorites because they were the most fun to record or because I like the way they turned out. But there's no real rhyme or reason or order to any of these. And as for the recommendations of the anime themselves, I will probably, most likely, pick an anime with different styles and different approaches, so that at least one of these anime might be something worth watching. Because I am well aware that a large amount of our audience are fairly casual anime watchers and sometimes need a little extra recommendation to point them in the direction of a show that they may have missed throughout the year. And as an added incentive, and to make up for the lack of a proper episode this week, I, at the end of this episode, am going to give everybody who listens to this episode the thing that Remington usually dreads, but I'm sure you all enjoy, and that is a choice. What that choice is? Well, you'll have to stick around to the very end of this little short episode to find out. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. I will alternate an episode that I enjoyed this year with an anime I enjoy this year. So let's get stuck into it with one of my favorite episodes we recorded this year, and I think you should really go back and give a listen to if you haven't. That would be episode 200, My Dress Up Darling, featuring Shaun and Flop. Now, this is a controversial episode for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, a lot of people who really, really adored this anime really, really either hated or loved our episode on it, because Remington absolutely tore it the fuck apart, to the point where our lovely guests of the Shaun and Flop podcast came straight back in and defended it with all of their heart and might and vigor, even though they themselves weren't all that passionate about the show. And I think that was a very fun experience overall. And hopefully, on a second listen through, people will enjoy it as much as I did. After all, Dress Up Darling, while it is a very wish fulfillment-y show, I do still think it has the kind of benefits and positive interactions that Remington insists it does not. But, we're not here to talk about the show, we're here to talk about the episode itself. Anytime I get to interact with the boys from the Shaun and Flop podcast, it's usually a lovely, wonderful event, and I can't wait to work with them again. And hopefully next time, it won't be as virulent of an experience. Now for the first anime recommendation. The first anime I'm going to recommend to y'all is, if you haven't watched it yet, please do. It's one of the funniest anime of the year, and it is a delightful romp as both a manga and a fully animated anime. It got a second core in the second half of the year, so all the more reason to give it a go if you didn't in the first place. I'm, of course, talking about Spy Family. Spy Family being a lovely show that we did cover on the podcast already, and I cannot wait to do a revisit of in the future as well, is just a lovely little family comedy about a spy who has to go undercover in enemy territory to try and get close to a dangerous politician who only shows his face at a school, using his newly adopted psychic daughter and his newly betrothed assassin wife. And the situations and comedy that arise from this anime are divine and wholesome and everything you could want in a good little lighthearted show. Not to mention that it's worth the hype. A lot of people are like, this is a great show. Everybody talks about it, but is it really worth the hype? In my opinion, it really is. Now, the next episode that I highly enjoyed making this year is a bit of a controversial one. And that would be mine and Remington's episode on Your Lie in April. That would be episode 194 back in February. And this is a little bit of a controversial one because it's one of our famous choice episodes. And the choice in the title is, of course, between Your Lie in April and Otokoi, which Otokoi is a highly recommended show that we will cover eventually. But unfortunately, this time around, what we ended up doing instead is revisiting and finishing all of Your Lie in April. And folks, let me tell you, this is a controversial episode that I still get emails about to this day. Remington has a very long and in-depth conversation with me about all of the deep-seated problems of Your Lie in April, and why the twist in Your Lie in April is even worse in hindsight than it was anticipated to be. Because unfortunately, for as acclaimed of a show it is, and it is a gorgeous show with lots of lovely music, the story beats and the way the characters interact with each other were so problematic that it drove Rem absolutely insane. And recording that episode with him was a grand old time, despite all of the negative reception that we have gotten because of it. The next anime that I have to recommend from 2022 that you guys should go give a watch if you're at all interested. The next anime from 2022 that I highly recommend is none other than Bocchi the Rock. Now, everybody listening to this right now is like, hey, wait a minute. That was a pretty recent episode. You guys did it when it was first airing and only watched 3 episodes of, and you stopped right before the 4th episode where a really cool, fun thing happened. How could you guys do that? How could you not wait to that point and cover the show when you covered it? And yeah, that is completely fair. I will admit I chose the anime to cover at the time because it was just rising in popularity, and it was a simple enough premise that I needed something nice and easy to help us recover during our busiest time of year. And since that 3rd episode and all the episodes after that, Bocchi has just continued to improve and be more of an entertaining and funny show that is incredibly relatable. And if you've ever experienced social anxiety at all, whether a minor or to an extreme extent, Bocchi the Rock is a lovely, fun representation of it while also having a fun musical element attached to it. And I highly recommend giving it a watch, despite what we may have said in our previous episode. And who knows, maybe I'll force Remington into a revisit if we can get enough response behind it. Or maybe it won't be interesting enough and we'll just have to let Remington's opinions lie where they are. But I will say right now, Bocchi the Rock, fantastic, entertaining show from 2022. The next episode on this list that I heavily enjoyed creating with Remington, to ultimately to his despair, I would have to say, is episode 202, Sword Art Online Alicization. And why was this one of my favorite episodes? Is it because it was a Sword Art Online episode and those episodes are always insanely fun for us to record despite the anger, fear, and frustration that Remington shows? Partially, but more so, it fully publicly showed the world why I should never roll dice on anybody's behalf. Because we tried something a little bit different with that episode where I had a list of various anime that I could show him, and I gave Remington a roll of the dice and a couple rerolls to ultimately decide what we watched that week. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, what ended up happening is he blew through all of his rerolls, and I ended up rolling very, very low, and we had to continue watching Sword Art Online Alicization. And it was such a dramatic shift in tone in that episode, followed by a very complex and in-depth 2 hour and 21-minute dive of all of the problems of the first half of Sword Art Online Alicization, which had been touted to me on several occasions as being one of the best parts of Sword Art Online. Quite frankly, the whole experience was wildly entertaining for me to go through with Remington, despite Remington wanting to throttle me alive throughout the whole experience. On to the next anime recommendation of an anime you should definitely consider giving a watch from 2022. I highly recommend, if you have the bandwidth and the desire, you gotta fight the hype. The hype is the most dangerous thing to any new show. I think everybody should go and give Chainsaw Man a try. Now, that's a bit of a bold recommendation. Why? Because everybody is saying, hey, everybody loves this show. What are you talking about? How is this a controversial recommendation? It's a controversial recommendation because the theming of Chainsaw Man is not going to be to everybody's tastes. Chainsaw Man is a very nihilistic story, a very dark story, and a very cynical story. Every character in it is, quite frankly, an asshole and fucked up and dark in all kinds of deep and unfavorable ways. And that can be a lot of heavy handed stuff to deal with if you're looking to just spend a lighthearted afternoon watching an anime. Not to mention, it's violent, bloody, and twisted in all kinds of sick and lovely ways. However, if you can stomach that kind of thing, I think it's well worth the watch. Or at the very least, picking up the manga and giving that a read. Because it is such a different show than we've had in recent times. And it scratches that dark fantasy horror itch while also occasionally making me laugh at the ridiculous situations everybody gets into. It's simultaneously a mature show while also being one of the most childish shows out there, and I cannot recommend it enough. I loved the manga, and the anime is a very fun visual experience. And for all the people who are saying, but the CG in it isn't all that great, as somebody who had to watch X-Arm this year, the CG is gorgeous in this, and the animation is gorgeous, and Studio Mappa did a pretty solid job. Go watch Chainsaw Man if you have the stomach for that kind of content. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Now, we've recorded a lot of different types of episodes on the podcast in this past year. We've recorded so many various animes that range in scope from the horny to the dark to the messed up to the hilarious to the just honestly straight up boring. But every once in a while, myself and Remington will record an episode or series of episodes that are just different enough to really spice up the viewing experience. And sometimes that means that I have to suffer as well, which is why one of the most interesting things to record in this past year was, in fact, the 12 Days of April Fools. Now I know what you're thinking. Shaun, you were fucking miserable in every single one of those recordings. How can you possibly list this as a highlight of the year? Quite simply, it is a highlight of the year because everybody that listened to our inaugural episode of the 12 Days of April Fools and then became a patron and listened to the remaining 11 days has had nothing but high praise for each individual episode and told us that it was a grand, wonderful, lovely experience. And the sheer positive feedback of everything involved means that though the actual recording of them was a bit rough for me, and let me tell you, the watching of everything involved was even worse, The 12 Days of April Fools was easily one of the biggest highlights of 2022. And I cannot recommend you listen to, at the very least, the public episode, which is episode 235, where I am forced to watch The Polar Express. And y'all, you'll never have guessed, I've gotten a lot of angry emails about my takes on The Polar Express, which, quite frankly, is hilarious to me. Regardless, though, I highly recommend it if you haven't given it a listen. I know it's not our normal content, but I think the sheer amount of positive feedback we've gotten on it is motivation enough to give her a go. And finally, my final anime recommendation of 2022 is, well, I'm going to be real with y'all. I'm cheating a little bit. I told myself when I was going to make this little episode that at the start, I am only going to reference anime that are brand new to the year. Why is that? Is simply due to the fact that, hey, if an anime is continuing or it's a new season, then it's not exactly fair to all of the other new anime of the year to just select something that I know I already like as the best anime of the season. And I wanted to keep that rule with giving my 2022 recommendations as well. But here's the thing, y'all. 2022 had the release of the third season of one of my favorite anime of all time. And if there was ever a sign to watch an anime, this was it. I'm talking about Mob Psycho Season 3. If you have never seen Mob Psycho 100, what are you doing? Go watch it right now. It is one of my favorite anime of all time, and as a professional weeb, there are thousands of people who will agree with me on that front. Is it a very pretty show? Yes and no. The art style can be a bit off-putting to a lot of people, but once you get stuck in, you realize that Studio Bones turned a very fantastic manga and animated it in the most dynamic, hilarious, and beautiful way possible, and it has only gotten better with subsequent seasons. So I'm breaking my rule for one of my favorite anime of all time to strongly encourage you, if you have not seen Mob Psycho, or if you started but couldn't quite get into it, give it another go. Watch the first season, then dive into the second season. By the middle of the second season, I can guarantee you'll be as hooked as I was. Granted, I was hooked in the middle of the first season, but that's because I'm a sucker for anything by one. Go figure. He's a great writer. But season 3 is one of the most beautifully animated, powerfully well done seasons of an anime, and it was so good that I had to break my rule. And because I'm willing to break a rule to bring it to the forefront, I hope everybody is willing to give it another go. I don't vouch for anime as strongly as this one because a lot of times my opinions will change. Mob Psycho has maintained itself as one of my favorite anime of all time, if not my favorite, and it is well worthy of your time, especially now that there's a whole third season to go through. And finally, one of my favorite episodes that we recorded in 2022 is, I'm going to be real with y'all, entirely selfish on my front, because the reason I enjoyed recording this episode so much was because it was the first time in a long, long time that I thoroughly and horribly bamboozled my co-host. That's right, I'm talking about episode 217, My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex. Is the show itself interesting and worth a conversation? Probably not. But the sheer amount of anger and frustration my bamboozle brought from Remington made that whole episode a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I hope everybody had a fun one with that one as well. I laid the trap expertly as far as I'm concerned, and he never suspected a thing until it was far, far too late. And honestly, considering that's where we started this show, it was a blast to the past that really resonated with me and made me incredibly grateful for all the time we have spent making this show. And hopefully, we will continue into 2023, making even more wonderful, fun episodes, maybe with some more bamboozles, that'll make everybody who enjoys our content just a little bit happier throughout the year. Now then, if you've stuck with me this long, I did promise a special prize at the end. A choice for everybody involved. And that choice, my dear, dear friends, is choosing what the next revisited episode of the podcast is going to be. That's right, I'm leaving it up to you guys. I have 4 different anime prepared that I'm ready to show Remington at any time for a long-awaited revisit. And I've chosen 4 of the most popularly requested revisits on my list that are all about equal in popularity, so it's more of an interesting decision to make. And I am going to make a post on our Twitter and likely on our Patreon as well with a poll dictating which one of these we return to. And it'll be up to you guys to decide which one you are most interested in hearing. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, now, Shaun, which 4 shows could those be? And I'll tell you. The first show that's up on the plate for a potential revisit is none other than Mob Psycho 100. I will admit, this is a very selfish one on my part. Why? Because I love the show, as I previously stated, and there's a new season, and I need a good-ass excuse to rewatch the series, as well as watch all the stuff that I haven't caught up on yet. That's what I want to do. And by Jove, if I have to manipulate my own podcast to do it, I will. Not to mention that we left it off at a point previously where Remington started singing the praises of the show, despite his kind of mixed feelings on the overall season 1. And it would be nice to see if I could force him to finish season 2 and get a more in-depth view on it. Will I be able to get that far with this revisit? Hard to say. At the very least, we're going to get a huge chunk of episodes of whatever revisit we return to. The second on this list is one that I don't want to revisit, but I will admit it's a good chance for content. And we've had a lot of requests because, hey, third time's the charm, right? Surely this time it'll be the episode that changes everything, and finally his opinion and maybe my opinion will change. That's right, I'm talking about a third revisit to Attack on Titan. Yep, our Attack on Titan haters who are still part of this crowd, I'm sorry, but just as many of you who want us to never go back to it, want us to go back to it in the vain hope that he will enjoy it, or at the very least, we'll have some good and entertaining fun talking about it again. After all, there's a fuck ton more of Attack on Titan to cover, and whether or not we cover any more, well, will be up to audience input. Third up on our list is none other than ReZero. We've gotten an insane amount of requests to revisit ReZero, whether that's because we cut it off at a very interesting point, being the middle of the mansion arc, or because people just love hearing Rem talk about a completely different Rem out of context, or because it's a decently wonderful show with a lot of dark theming as well as character growth, which you don't always see in a show. And it'd be nice to have a conversation about it one more time and see if Remington's opinion of the show continues to improve, or if he will find new ways to break the hearts of all of the Rem fans out there. I mean, after all, he already crushed the souls of all Emilia fans, so might as well see if he can do the same for all Rem fans as well. And finally, the last anime on this list is admittedly another selfish one, and kind of a softball, but quite frankly, it's been too long, and I want to finish Yorimoi, or A Place Further Than the Universe. Now, if y'all don't recall what A Place Further Than the Universe is, that's fair and understandable. It hurts my feelings, but it's fair and understandable. Place Further Than the Universe was the anime equivalent of a emotional wake-up for a lot of people back in 2018, myself included. It is one of my favorite anime of all time, and while on the surface it appears to be just a show about surface-level cute girls doing cute things on the way to Antarctica, it is far, far more than that. To the point where not only did my lovely co-host sing its praises all the way back when we first recorded our first episode on it, but also by episode 7 of the series, my dear editor Dylan, bless his heart, teared up because of a lot of the emotional resonance of these characters. And hey, if you can make that edgy boy tear up and cry, ain't it a good show? Ain't it worth revisiting? Yes, wink wink, nudge nudge. But ultimately it's not up to me. It's up to you guys. I will put up the poll as soon as this episode goes live, and it'll have, let's say, a week to 2 weeks for everybody to vote on it. And the next time we do a revisit, it will be your guys' choice. Think of it as a grand thank you for being patient with us during this rather exhausting time, as well as to thank you for being as involved in our community as you have been. We are immensely grateful. Beyond words can really describe. We have, honestly, one of the luckiest situations two weird dudes who make a podcast could hope for. A lot of people who seem to love and care about our content to the point where they're willing to send us messages and chat with us and talk about their own feelings on various shows, and that sense of community means the world to myself and Remington and Dylan. And because of that, we wanted to give it back to everybody in some way. And 2023, we're going to do everything in our power to ramp up our interactions. We're going to try and reach out to more people to do collab episodes. We're going to try and actually be proper content creators. We're going to stream on Twitch more. We're going to do all kinds of lovely things. All because you guys have requested it, and we want to continue to do more to make everybody happy. So for that, we sincerely thank you and cannot wait to see where 2023 takes us. We love you all very, very much. And as always, don't fuck your sister.